right, well, greetings everybody, and welcome to another edition of Jamie's Journeys. And today we are coming to you from the Pearl of the Orient, and that is the city of Manila in the Philippines. And we're now traveling on a high-speed Sun Cruises ferry to the island of Corregidor. Now, Corregidor is just about 23 nautical miles from Manila, and it's at the entrance to the Bay of Manila. So it was a very strategic point during World War II. Of course, the Corregidor itself is most famous for that time period because it is here where the Philippine and American forces held off the Japanese invaders for about 27 days after the fall of Bataan. Now that turned out to be quite crucial because due to the resistance and the time it took the Japanese to get across the Philippines and also get past here, Corregidor, which was the last bastion, that additional 27 days helped save Australia from the invasion by the Japanese. So we're going to go ashore. We're going to see some of the old military sites and share with you some of the history of this fascinating place to visit, Corregidor. All right, well, we're just pulling up now to Corregidor, and this is a tadpole-shaped island, and it's actually one of 5 islands, by far the largest. And even though it's the largest, it's only 3 square miles, so not very big. Of the 5 islands, there were actually 4 of them were militarized, and we're going to step ashore. We're going to jump on these are called tramways. And this will be our transportation around the island. And we're going to go show you the sights. So let's go ashore and get started on our tour. In 1898, the United States paid Spain $20 million for the Philippines. It had been occupied by them for over 400 years. They actually named this island. It is, as we said, it protects the Bay of Manila. So it was a fortification, it was a customs house, and it was also a prison. And that is how it is believed it's got its name. Corregidor, if you translate that into Spanish, that translates into the correction. So it was known as the island of correction. And here, the prisoners who were sent here were forced to do hard labor. Now, when America came in and took over the island, they too refortified the island. They built a series of 23 different batteries, placed 56 guns, which we're going to see on our tour today. And that was a noble idea. They did it because of the impending thought that maybe someday Japan would come and invade these islands. However, by the time Japan invaded the islands, all the war technology that was placed on this island was almost 30 years old. Well, we've now come to Battery Way, one of the 23 batteries here on the island, and this one has 4 gun placements. The cement of the buildings took 1 year to harden, and it's all said to be bomb-proof or bulletproof, and actually, it proved the test of time. It is. These guns are called 12-inch mortar guns. They fired shells that weighed 650 pounds each, and it took 14 people to run one gun. All right, well, Corregidor was bombed twice. It was bombed once by the Japanese when they wanted to take over the island, and then it was bombed when the Americans came to reclaim it. This hole in the ground here is a result from a 1,000-pound bomb that the Americans dropped on the Japanese while they were here. This gun was the last gun that was, or last battery. This is just one gun, one battery. It was the last one built. The first battery we saw had a range of just under 9 miles. This shell, although it's also a 12-inch shell, could be shot 17 miles. And the turret turns 360 degrees. What the Americans did before they left is that they cut off the recoil springs. They sawed it off so that the gun would be pretty much useless. And also they took the trajectory codes that you see on the side here, and they chiseled them or scratched them off so that they couldn't be used by the Japanese. All right, this is where they kept the shells. And this goes way back, so they put the shells on the carts and they would bring them out to load the gun. All right, so we are now at what's called the topside barracks, and here's a great vista point because behind me you see the oldest structure on the island, which is the old lighthouse. Dates back to, I believe, 1928. When the Americans came to retake the island in 1945, 8,000 paratroopers jumped from a plane from 400 feet up. They gave them about 20 seconds from the time they left the plane to the time they hit the ground. They had specially made parachutes just for that jump. Now, just behind the lighthouse there was drop zone B, and drop zone A was in this direction right here. And now what we're going to do, we're just going to go inside and take a look at the topside barracks. This housed the 59th Regiment, which could house up to 8,000 soldiers. Let's go take a look. You know, this area was said to be one of the two most bombed out areas of the war, Corregidor and Malta. Now, Malta had more bombs dropped on it, but this one, on the very first day of bombing by the Japanese, 60,000 tons of bombs dropped on this island. And this island is about 1/8 the size of Malta. We do see up here on the wall the remnants of the emblem for the 59th Regiment, so that still remains. We're here at the old flagpole, and this is where General MacArthur raised the flag upon liberating the island. And it says here, "I see the old flagstaff still stands. Have your men hoist the colors to its peak, and let no enemy ever haul them down." Spoken by General MacArthur, March 2nd, 1945. And in the background, you see the 503rd Parachute Regiment, who captured the island. You know, when the island was about to be taken over by the Japanese, the Americans lowered the flag. They cut it up into pieces, and they each took a small piece and they put it in their pocket or in their wallet or in their shoe. When the Japanese came, they hoisted a new flag and then had pictures of their new flag being lowered from this staff here. Well, it's a great view from up here. Actually, I had said this was built in the 20s. This was the lighthouse, which we're on now. It was actually built in 1936 by the Spanish. Offers a great view across the bay to Bataan. That might be very familiar to many of you. Bataan fell first, and then Corregidor fell 27 days later. Now, the people who surrendered in Bataan, that was 76,000 soldiers. Were forced to surrender. You heard of the Death March of Bataan. Took place over here. They marched 65 miles in 7 to 8 days, and in that time 20,000 soldiers perished. Now, the soldiers who surrendered here on Corregidor did not participate in that because the Death March actually finished, the last person finished 10 days after the fall of Corregidor. quick little walk. You know, from the time the Americans left to the time they returned, it was 2.5 years. When they declared that the island was secured, 10 months later, 20 Japanese walked out of the bush and surrendered to a security guard who was sitting outside of the YMCA. I think he was pretty startled that night, especially because he was asleep at the time they appeared out of the bush. We're at a battery called Battery Geary. There were 8 guns here on the battery, and this was probably the most effective of all the batteries. This battery alone was responsible for the death of 2,000 Japanese on Bataan, which we saw was across the way. However, its location was kept secret for quite some time, but then finally the Japanese got closer and closer, and then they did find Battery Geary. And what you see now, which we'll show, is really how this was left after the bombardment. A bomb fell, igniting the supply for where all the ammunition was kept, and they said it created a black cloud for a couple days. The cannons that we see are in their exact position, and some were thrown through concrete walls. One was even thrown up to the lighthouse, and you can see another one down the road, which is where it still lies from the day that this place was destroyed. All right, we're really just down the road, about 200 yards from Battery Geary. Another fact about that, it was said that 27 Americans died when that finally blew up. There was an unexploded shell found in the casing of the gun, which means that they were still fighting up to the very last moment. Now we've come down to Battery Crockett, and this gun, which is another awesome piece of technology. By the way, these guns were made in the United States. This one was actually manufactured in New York. Most of the other guns were from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. At the bottom of this, you can see 60 tons of counterbalancing weight. Now, this gun was very special because it was covered, and what it would do, it would rise up, shoot, and go back down. And it took the Japanese a long time to find out the placement of this gun as well. The space is enormous. You can see the pockmarks where shells had landed on the impenetrable top it had, but underneath here was where all the ammunition was kept. Look at this one here, too. Direct hit. Well, here's a image of General MacArthur with the words below that say, "I shall return." Actually, many Americans, even myself, believe that he said that when he was leaving Corregidor. Actually, he has really said it once he arrived on the Australian mainland. Actually, these are the docks where MacArthur left from, and he didn't want to go. He was told on 3 different occasions by Roosevelt, either leave here or leave the Army. He finally acquiesced. PT boat number 41 was on the Navy side of the island. He came to the Army side because he was always an Army man. And from here, these docks, he left for Australia. We're at the Japanese cemetery, and you see some of the Japanese gun emplacements here. This actually is a controversial bit of land, but nonetheless, it was lost for a long time. It was actually discovered in 1986 by a photo that a man found, I should say with the help of a photo, a man found in a garage sale in Portland, Oregon. 4,500 Japanese were buried here by Americans. And of course, most of the Japanese are not Christian, but each one was buried with a white Christian cross. This was the only Japanese cemetery in World War II made by the Americans. All right, we're now at the Melita Tunnel. This was built in 1932, and it was built by Filipino inmates, meaning criminals. And it's named Melita because as they were digging in here, Melita stands for leeches, and they kept saying leeches, leeches. So that's its name today. It's 836 feet long, 24 feet wide, and there's all 24 different arms that run off that tunnel system, and it's an enormous place, and lots of things went on inside here. This is where General MacArthur stayed. Once the bombing started on the island of Corregidor, he stayed inside the tunnel the entire time. There was hospitals in there, there was command posts, a lot of different things took place. So this is also when General Wainwright finally surrendered. The remaining Americans were held up here in the Melita Tunnel, and they came out here and surrendered to the Japanese. Now, 3 years later, when Americans came back and took over the island, this too is where many of the Japanese were held up. However, inside, over 2,000 of them either blew themselves up or in some way committed hara-kiri. Well, actually, in the Melita Tunnel, there's a very good movie that you'll have the opportunity to see when you come here as well. You know, the island of Corregidor, as we said earlier, that this was purchased by, well, not just the island of Corregidor, but the Philippines, was purchased for $20 million. Well, once the Americans took over, maybe 10 years later, they began to sink about $100 million into the fortification of Corregidor. And for a period of 20, 30 years or so, it was quite the place to be stationed. There were movie theaters, there were golf courses, there were dance halls. It was a pretty good place to be. Anyway, that changed very quickly with the advent of the war. Well, we've got one more stop to make, but before we do, I just want to say that the day has been wonderful. We've had so much information, and they've really kept us moving. At each stop, the most time we had to get off the vehicle and get back on was about 7 minutes. That was it. But we saw many different structures. There's at one time, the height of the period here, there was over 700 structures on the island, and we saw maybe 15 of those structures today. Anyway, it was truly a great day, and now we're going to get back on and move on to our last stop, which is going to be the museum and also a place of remembrance for the fallen soldiers. All right, we're going to go in to the Pacific War Memorial Museum, see some of the relics from battle, and then we'll go pay our respects to the fallen. When America purchased and then took over Corregidor, this is the first American flag to fly over it. It was hoisted May 14th, 1899, and it only had 45 stars. Oh, this is a commemoration here to General Wainwright, who was the commander left in charge. General MacArthur, in February of '42, established the command, the Allied command here on Corregidor. As well, the Philippine government also transitioned here as well, along with their nation's riches, tons and tons of gold, which were stored in a tunnel. But Wainwright was left in command of the island and told to protect it, secure it as long as you possibly can. These four are very stirring memos that General Wainwright wrote to his commanders, to the president, updating them on the situation here in Corregidor, and talks about the conditions and what the men were enduring. Constant bombardment from Bataan, aerial bombardment from the Japanese, starvation. Very, very moving indeed. Of course, he eventually had to surrender the island to the Japanese. It says, to live in freedom's light is the right of mankind. In a speech delivered at the signing on board the USS Missouri on September 2nd, 1945, General Douglas MacArthur said these words. He said, "It is my earnest hope, and indeed the hope of all mankind, that a better world shall emerge out of the blood and carnage of the past, a world founded upon faith and understanding, a world dedicated to the dignity of man and the fulfillment of his most cherished wish for freedom, tolerance, and justice. Well, that's going to do it for our journey here on Corregidor. We hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for joining us on another Jamie's Journey. Hope you come travel with me again.